Hello, I am Stephanie East, and welcome to Trojan Vision One-on-One, where we take a deep look at the people who make Troy University special. And we are so excited today to talk to Barry McKnight. And of course, if you have followed anything concerning Trojan athletics, you know who this person is. He is the voice of the Trojans, a person who definitely makes the Troy University family so special. Thank you so much for being with us today, Barry.
Oh, thanks for the intro. Very excited about all of this.
I'm excited to learn more about you and about your background. And you know, we talked about how Trojan Vision One-on-One is going to take an in-depth look at the people who make Troy special. So in your opinion, what does make the Troy Trojan family a unique and special place?
I think it's an interesting perspective for me, especially because I get around a little bit. Because of my work, I see other schools and go to other places, not just within the Sun Belt and not just in football, but really all over. And there's a couple of things that always strike me about Troy that's just different. Sometimes it's difficult to quantify or to put into words, but there's two things that are unique together. The fact that it is a small campus in a small town, but it has big-time Division I athletics, big-time academics, so many resources for a small town. When I go out and speak, for instance, to incoming freshmen, let's say, or to their parents about what they can expect from Troy, I say for me, and I've been a small town guy my whole life, for me it's the fact that you can get a high quality education. If you're a student athlete, you can participate at the highest level of collegiate athletics and live in a town that's insular in the sense that everybody cares about this school, everybody cares about this university, and by extension, everybody cares about you. I always was struck by that, but the longer I'm at this job and the longer I'm with this university and get to represent it at other places, the more I realize just how truly unique Troy really is.
It really is. It's such a great place, and I absolutely agree with you. And you are known as the voice of the Trojans. You know, we associate Troy athletics with your voice. Tell us how you got into broadcasting.
Well, it's a story that began really when I was a little boy. I grew up in Central Florida, a little town in Brevard County called Palm Bay, and we lived right across the street from the big municipal athletic complex. Baseball fields, football fields, a pond, basketball courts, tennis courts, all that. We were directly across the street from it. And so when I was little, I played. The weather was always good. I played for sure, but when I wasn't playing baseball, at 10 or 11 years old, they let me do the public address up there in a little rickety plywood shack above the dugout at the baseball field. And after the game, they let me have a free snow cone. I thought this was the apex of life at that point. I mean, how could it get any better? And I took it seriously as an 11-year-old. I kept score up there. I paid attention. I went down before the games and made sure I have everybody's pronunciations right. And it just fascinated me. The work fascinated me. And so I started doing that. My sister Melanie and I used to do a little drop on a local radio station about our middle school that lasted about a minute. And so we kind of got involved with that. I kind of fell in love with it. And then, we moved around a couple more times. I ended up going to school at the University of Florida and didn't really pursue it then. Really thought that, I was going to try something else. But then I broke my leg when I was at Florida. I had to take a year off from school, and I had to find a way to make some money while I was taking that year off. And I had a chance to work at a radio station. I could sit there, my leg in a cast, and I could do it. And by the time it came time to go back to school, I enrolled at Auburn University for many reasons, but because I had an opportunity to work at a commercial radio station there. So I started at Auburn at WAUD. My very first year, they let me do Auburn University baseball. Bo Jackson was on that team, just to let you know how far along back that was. I did high school football, but I also did what we called an air shift, played music, did the news and things like that, and just really fell in love with it all over again. And counting television, that's all I've ever done from then on for a living.
And then, so what specifically brought you to Troy University?
Well, I had branched out and started doing a lot of television along with my work in radio. And I had started working as the primary sports broadcaster, play-by-play broadcaster, for a regional sports network called College Sports Southeast. And by that time, I was working a morning show, sports show in Montgomery, which I had done for 26 years. And Roger Schultz at Troy said, hey, we're doing a package of the Troy University football games, the home games, on that regional network. Would you be interested in doing it? And I said, absolutely. This was back in the Troy State days when they were still in 1AA and playing the Southland Football League. I worked with a great gentleman named Phil Paramore. And you really got a sense then that this was like getting onto the first floor of a rising elevator, that this place had real potential, not just potential. Potential doesn't really mean anything if you don't act upon it. And this was a university that was prepared to act upon it. 2 years later, the radio play-by-play job, the voice job, came open. And they came to me and asked me if I would be interested in doing it. It took me about a quarter second to say yes, because again, out of all of the aspirations I had from a little kid, this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do sports. I wanted to be a play-by-play voice of a collegiate athletic institution. This was my opportunity, and I've taken it and run with it. I've grown a little bit in the job, and the job certainly, and the university certainly, has grown a lot more than I have.
Well, and you touched on what I wanted to touch on next, actually, which is, with you having been the voice of the Trojans for many years now, talk about some of those changes from when you started to where Troy University athletics is today.
Well, when I started, football was an independent, which is difficult, because you have to make up your own schedule. We went a lot of different places. My very first game was at Nebraska, later on games at Virginia and things like that, which is great for a broadcaster because I get to go all these wonderful places and again get to represent Troy University. But also basketball was in the Trans-American Athletic Conference, playing at the old Sartain Hall. Baseball was at the old Riddle Pace Field. The programs have always been highly successful and competitive. That hasn't changed that much. The fans' expectations is always for the programs to be highly successful and competitive. That certainly hasn't changed. But as Troy grows into, full Division 1A FBS membership, there had to be some growth in the resources, growth in the support, growth in the outreach. And all of that has gone way above and beyond even what I had thought that it was going to be. The facilities, again, with my perspective of having been a lot of places, particularly in the Sun Belt Conference, the facilities are unparalleled anywhere else. At our level and with the size of our school, the support and the alignment from the university is unmatched. Nobody, I promise you, nobody in the Sun Belt Conference supports athletics like Dr. Hawkins, and the administration and the fan base and the students support Troy University. So in that sense, it's really grown. The key is that everything else around college athletics has grown as well. The demands on the student athletes, the demands on their time, the NIL factor, the arms race in terms of facilities. So while Troy has grown, those demands and those expectations have grown as well. It's been an interesting dynamic to see it all grow kind of at the same rate.
Well, you are involved with all of the sports with Troy Athletics, and that takes a lot of preparation to know the players on each team and the coaches of each sport. So tell us a little bit behind the process of what it takes to get ready for all of these athletic events that you attend.
Well, Stephanie, I like to think that I'm a pretty even-keeled, pretty well-adjusted guy. I have one real phobia. If I ever have a nightmare, it's that I show up for a game and the teams have changed, or I don't have my spotting charts, or I haven't gotten the preparation done. To me, that is horrifying to say, okay, now what do I do? It's like playing a football game without any plays. It's the backbone of everything I do. It would be absolutely horrifying if I was an announcer, and there are several who just show up with a scorecard and say, okay, let's go. For me, the rule of thumb I always use in preparation, for instance, in a football game. The football game itself lasts about 3.5 hours. Our broadcast will last closer to 5. So you take those 5 hours on the air and you double it. That's 10 hours worth of preparation. And that's hard preparation. I do some other stuff, but the actual sit down at your desk, research the other team, talk to your coach, try to talk to their coach, talk to the student athletes, go over the statistics, write them all down, put my spotting charts out, note changes, not only note the changes, but why those changes have been made. And if you don't know, you better find out. To me, it's a lot like it's a test in front of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and you've got one shot at it. You don't get a retest or you don't get to call in sick. The good news is you get all of your preparation materials in front of you. That's my rule of thumb. However long the broadcast is. For basketball, it's a 2.5 hour broadcast, so you better prepare for 5. Baseball, same way. The difficulty in basketball is a lot of times you have to do your preparation on the road. There are usually 2 game road trips. So if we're in Boone, North Carolina on a Thursday, and we're in Conway, South Carolina on a Saturday, on Friday, we're on the road with the team traveling, and I better get everything done. So there's a lot that's involved with it. I've developed my own system. My spotting charts that I've developed are used by a lot of people around the country. My basketball charts, particularly my baseball scorecards and stuff that I've developed myself. It's all trial and error. I've never have taken a course in anything pertaining to sportscasting, which is not necessarily the right way to do it. But everything has been trial and error, and now I'm at the point in my career where I'm familiar with the layout of everything. I know where everything is going to be, and that really does help as well. But there's really no substitute for just sitting down when nobody's looking and nobody's cheering for you and nobody's encouraging you and just doing the work.
And I'm assuming you also have to roll with the punches, because I know just a few weeks ago soccer was supposed to be played on a Friday, but because of weather they had to switch it to a Wednesday, and then you had to readjust. And so I'm sure rolling with the punches is a big part of it too.
Well, I take a lot of pride in that. You know, the fact that, and I say this to each one of my broadcast crew members for football. Big shout out to Jerry Miller and Chris Blackshear and Bob Templin, our spotter, and Scott Hageman, our producer, particularly Jerry Miller with basketball and with baseball as well. Being a great conditions broadcaster is relatively easy. You've got a great spot to broadcast from, the weather's good, you're thoroughly prepared, you've had no issues in travel and everything. You can get out there and you can do it. It's how you prepare when the conditions are bad, or when you've got a curveball thrown at you, or a wrench, or whatever euphemism you want to use, that really makes the difference. I broadcast everywhere from spread eagled on a wrestling mat at the baseline of a basketball end zone to, you know, a palatial place at Ohio State and Nebraska. And you like to think that both of those broadcasts went exactly the same way. The conditions should never affect your broadcast. The one you're talking about, the soccer match, it was on a Wednesday, moved up, but it was also at noon.
Yes.
And noon is a little bit more difficult because you have got, again, to get everything ready a lot sooner. You have to scramble around to get that done, but you don't want to miss any. You don't want to miss any of the things that you need for your preparation because you're scrambling around as much as you are.
Now, you mentioned your crew just a second ago, so talk about what makes your crew special and makes you all work well together.
Well, for our football crew, I do think there's something to be said for longevity. Jerry and I have been working together for over 20 years, and he's the only color analyst I know in the nation for college that does football, basketball, baseball. Everybody else always kind of specializes. Jerry does it all. Jerry and I can finish each other's sentences. You know, we've had people up in our booth that see just how seamlessly we work, because when I set him up for something, you're in the industry, you know what I mean. When I set him up for something, I don't have to worry whether he'll take the narrative or not. I know he will. Whenever there's a big game or a critical moment of a game, I know he's always prepared for it. I know that he'll never oversell the moment. I know he'll never step on me, and I'll never step on him. For Chris on the sidelines, we've been together for 16 years, and he's the best I know at the sidelines. A lot of announcers, they'll go to a sideline reporter. I don't want to get too technical, but we'll go to a sideline reporter maybe twice, 3 times a quarter. Let's send it down to the sidelines for this blank sideline report. Well, with Chris, we keep his microphone open all the time. We never keep him up or down. We keep him up always because his content is usually so good. You always know that he understands the pacing. He'll never jump in between us. He'll never jump in over me. Jerry will never jump over him. So a lot of it has to do with just working with each other for as much as we had. But again, it comes down to this as well. They're always prepared. They always know what the important themes to the game are, the important, where the game may turn, and we go over that beforehand. We develop a theme in the pregame show, and we continue kind of updating that theme throughout the broadcast. Is this really what's happening, what we thought was going to happen? If it is, great, we look smart. If it's not, you update it. Well, remember, this guy got injured in the game, so this is what they're doing. It's always a different broadcast. It's never the same, which is another reason why I enjoy it so much.
Well, unfortunately, you mentioned football, and we know this season we may not be seeing as much success right now as we have in the past. What is the difference? What is it like trying to keep the fans encouraged, like to keep the motivation high? What is the difference this season?
Well, that's a perceptive question to ask. I get kind of a presupposition from a lot of our fans, oh, it must be much more difficult. My job as the voice of the Trojans is to present what's going on the field with a little insight into why it's happening. The main basic requirement that any viewer or any listener has of an announcer is to tell the truth more than anything else. Again, you know what how your reliability factors into everything you do on air. If somebody ever perceived that, man, Barry's lying to me about that, that would be totally injurious to me. But on the other hand, you can be positive without lying. You can do that. It has been difficult. My job, though, doesn't change. I still prepare just as much if Troy is a 35-point favorite in the football game or if they're a 21-point underdog. That never changes. My job is not to win the game. My job is not to lose the game. Neither is Jerry's, neither is Chris's. Our job is to present what's happening on the football field, tell people why, and because we are the voices of the program, try to engage the fan base a little bit more, encourage a little bit more. These are young people after all. So overall, I don't think it changes all that much, again, because you want to keep your reputation for truth telling probably more than anything else.
Being the voice of the Trojans for so long here at Troy, is there one particular moment in any sport, football, basketball, baseball, that stands out to you as one of the most memorable that you've had?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is the LSU game in 2017. Troy won that game 24-21 in Baton Rouge. And there were some great plays throughout the game. Troy forced a fumble on the first play. They got a late field goal in the first half. And of course, they got the interception at the end from Blaise Brown, where I said, God bless you, Blaise Brown. And Blaise tells me to this day that he still hears about that all the time. So there were some great moments on the field. But to me, I remember that most because before the game started, we were a decided underdog. And Jerry and Chris and I got together and we said, look, whatever happens, this is how we want to approach this game. These are the key factors. Like always, this is what we think it's going to come down to. Let's execute our little framework. Let's reinforce our themes throughout the ball game. And and when it got to halftime and Troy was leading by a fairly significant amount, we all got together and said, okay, we've got a real chance in this one. Let's not oversell it. Let's not be shrill and scream or anything, but let's be prepared if it comes down to this at the very end, which it did. And at the end, none of us was totally hyper, none of us was out of control, even though we all felt like it inside. But at the very end, when Blaise Brown had the interception and Troy was gonna win it, and Jerry said, oh, this is sweet, as we knelt down for the last little bit. We got done with the entire broadcast, with the post-game interviews, with the statistics and all that, and we set the headphones down, and it was one of the purest moments I've ever had because we looked at each other and we said, that was a good broadcast. We had a lot to go over. We had a lot to develop. We had a lot of highlights, and we executed everything. I don't know that we could have done it better than we did it, to be a little bit overboard in self-praise. It was really good.
No, absolutely. I can imagine that was definitely a time that stood out. Now, I've had you speak to several of my classes over the years, and my students always enjoy hearing from you. And one thing that I've found interesting is how you tell them to have a good interview and what you need to do to get good emotion and get good sound bites from your interviews. Tell us a little bit about how you do that.
Well, with the interviews, and again, I've added to my role at Troy to where I'm doing a lot of interviews for Troy University with researchers, people who are cancer researchers, and people who have specializations in Old English. One of the things that you always want to find out about, you always want to establish with an interviewee is, number one, you have to figure out why this person's story is compelling. What is it about this that we want to explore? Number two, you always ask them, you always ask the question and let them respond. A lot of interviewers don't. They will, many of them, I think, fall under the illusion that people are there to hear them interview, which they're not. You're there to hear the interviewee more than anything else. And the third thing you always want to leave them with is you always want to say, and now what? What is this? What's your story? What is the moral of all of this? And what message is there in what we're talking about? If you can get a rapport between yourself and the interviewer and the interviewee, it helps establish a rapport with the interviewee and the listener. It's never about you. It's always about them, and it's always about their story and their content.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great advice. Now, of course, we want you to be at Troy for a very, very long time. But what do you hope your legacy is? How do you hope people 50 years from now look back and think of Barry McKnight and the voice of the Trojans?
Well, as far as the job goes, yeah, there's plenty of things. As far as personally goes, it's a lot of the same things everybody else, wants. I want to be known as a good father, a good husband, a good grandfather, a good son, and all of that. And that's really important to me. But in terms of the job, the cliche is is for people to leave things better than they found it. For me, that's for somebody else to decide. When my legacy is over with here, whenever that is, hopefully many years from now, I want people to look back and say, Barry was really fulfilled. I mean, I could see watching Barry work or listening to Barry's broadcasts or watching him on television that this was truly what he wanted to do with his life. Believe me, out of all of the people I know, I am one of the least miscast people I know. I have strengths. I know I have certain strengths. I have weaknesses which you try to camouflage, but more than just about anybody I know, I am very fulfilled and self-satisfied with my career choice, where I am, and what I'm doing. And I hope that permeates the broadcast as well.
Well, we've done a lot of talking about your time here at Troy, but you also host a show with John Longshore. Tell us about the history of that show and how it came about and how it got resurrected.
Yeah, John Longshore and I first got together and did a show in Montgomery at WMSP Radio in 1997. I'll never forget it. March 19th, 1997 was our first day on the air together. It was also the first day that we had met. I had been working at a radio station in Auburn, and they had presented me with an opportunity to work at the big radio cluster in Montgomery, to work with this guy, which I had done a couple of sports talk programs, but that's not truly my personality, to be out and brassy and bold and all of that. So I was a little trepidation there, and I'm working with somebody I'd never met before. I had an Auburn background, he had an Alabama background, and we got together, and it really just jived really well. We worked together until this past January on the radio, 26 years, which never happens in the terrestrial broadcast medium. never happens anymore, especially. And we always, had great ratings, always. We always met our sales goals. We always had a good time, built up a great following. And when that ended in January, we decided, I guess it's been 2 months ago, to put together a YouTube program with video. I've got a studio in my home. He's got a studio in his home. And it really just kind of flows the same way. He's great to work with. He's a lot more opinionated and a lot more abrasive than I am, but I'm the one who has the broadcast background, so there's always that dynamic of being the smooth broadcaster versus being the abrasive guy who will say anything. And I don't try to get too in-depth into the psychology of it all. It just works, Stephanie.
I know, it's enjoyable for sure. And I saw on Facebook that you guys had a fan up in Washington, D.C., that there was a Longshore and McKnight or
bumper
sticker. Yes, exactly. Well, Barry McKnight, thank you so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed learning more about your background, and of course, you are a Troy University treasure. So thank you so much.
Much respect to you and your work and everything. I've enjoyed it. Thanks for thinking of me.
Thank you so much, and you join us next time here on Trojan Vision One-on-One.